Well, hi, everybody. I'm Don Stewart, and welcome to another edition of Breaking News. Today is Saturday, December 30th, 2023, the next to the last day in this year, and the time has gone by so very fast, and so many things have happened in 2023, and that's what we're all about here. Every single day, we've been coming to you and giving you the latest news. We call it breaking news because it's the latest news about what's taking place in the world with respect to what the Bible has to say about the time of the end. Last day's Bible prophecy tells us a number of things, in fact, many things of what the world will look like. And as we see here, every single day, it is amazing how it's all set up. So again, we encourage you to tell others about our program, to go to our website, Educating Our World, where we have 65 books in PDF form you can download on 11 different subjects, including 12 books on Bible prophecy, 12 books on the Bible itself. 7 books on Jesus, 7 books on God, and again, going into great detail of what the scripture teaches about these particular subjects. Now, one of the things we do here is try and give you the big picture. A number of times in some of the books we've written and some of the updates I've done recently, I give a quote from a 19th century scholar, E.W. Bullinger, how to accomplish the goal, how to properly solve Bible questions or Bible difficulties. Just let me read it for a second, what he said, and then expound a little bit. He said, there is one great principle in the science of logic which will meet all the difficulties if we are careful to observe it. It is this: we cannot reason from the particular to the general. That is to say, we cannot find the general principles, which we may regard as the truth, by arguing from certain particular parts of the truth. On the contrary, we must reason from the general to the particular if we would reason accurately. In other words, we need to get the big picture first. We need to understand what the scripture has to say in its totality, get an idea of what the Bible is teaching about these subjects, and then go to particular passages and see how they fit in. The mistake that's often made is people go from the particular. They find a passage here, then try and give a general truth. And that's just not the way we should do it or the way we do it here. So we need to be very careful of that as we look at these stories here. All right, our first story here is more good news. Yesterday we had this story from All Israel News about there seems to be a revival going on amongst Palestinians in Gaza coming to faith in Jesus Christ. A Palestinian Christian gave his testimony, a former terrorist, of what's taking place. Well, today we find the Christian population, while it's decreasing across the Middle East, it's actually on the rise in the Jewish state. This is great news. Israel's Central Bureau of Statistics published information on the Jewish state's Christian community showing the population has increased by 1.3% from the year before. Around 187,900 Christians live in Israel, representing 1.9% of the total population. Over the last 2 years, the Christian population has been growing in Israel. Now, what's interesting, Arab Christians make up about 75.3% of the total number of Christians in Israel, representing just 6.9% of the total Arab population in the Jewish state. And this is something that we mentioned here, and we're going to mention it more and more and make this point. There's many, many Arab Christians in Israel that that believe in Jesus Christ. There's a good number of them, and we can't forget them. The mistake people make is think all Arabs are Muslims. They are not. Are all Arabs, hate the Jews? They do not. There are a lot of believers in Jesus Christ among the Arab community. This is a point we want to make. And so, on the one hand, the Christian population continues to flourish in Israel, but they're gradually disappearing Christians, unfortunately, from other areas of the Middle East. Horrifying growth and persecution, which we document here by Muslims in the Middle East. According to the organization Open Doors, they provide an annual list of where Christians are subject to high levels of persecution and discrimination, and it's getting worse and worse, particularly in Yemen, Libya, Iran, Afghanistan, Iraq, Morocco, Qatar, Egypt, and Turkey, and other Muslim majority countries in the Middle East. Note that Israel does not appear on that list of countries that persecute the Jews. Now, what's interesting here, too, about this, one more thing about this survey, more than 84% of the Christians in Israel graduated from high school, and more than half of the Arab Christians went on to study for a bachelor's degree within 8 years of their high school graduation, compared to just a third of the total number of high school graduates in the Arab school system, less than half in the Hebrew education system. So they're going on to school, they're They're going on to places of higher learning, and they're having an influence. They really are. They're leaders, although it's very tough with the background of Islam that's there. But they stand forth for the truth, stand firm for the truth of Jesus Christ. So we need to pray for them. But that's really good news. It's growing, it's increasing in Israel, the number of Christians there. And as we know, eventually Israel will turn to faith in Jesus Christ. Um, They'll look upon him whom they have pierced after they're going through this period of great tribulation. All right, now our second update, our second story today is so consistent with what the Bible teaches about the time of the end, like all the stories we do. The headline is Europe is terrified and kowtows to Hamas. Again, another story that fits right in line. Support of Hamas is support for oppressive Islamic imperialism, which is and will continue to turn the hatred of Israel onto the West, bringing terrorism and violence in its wake. But when the free world wakes up to the danger, it may be too late. And what's interesting, the story goes on to say that every march in Paris, every headline in the UK Guardian, Le Monde, which is a French newspaper source, or the New York Times, every academic paper from the Progressive School of Thought or the BBC, the leftist BBC report, what do they do every report? They only radicalize Muslims in the West further. This is the fuel that encourages some to carry out terror attacks, the weakness of the West. And we're seeing that, and Europe in particular is doing this, kowtowing to Iran. Now, the symbols of the West, Christmas, Jews, Israel, Judaism, again, they're being attacked. There are a number of stories that we have of Christmas being canceled, marches all around, literally all around the world that have done this, not only attacking Israel for what's going on in Gaza, but attacking Christians for being part of it and supporting Israel. And of course, Western civilization, the Judeo-Christian ethic is what is our foundation, and that's what's being attacked. So we're not surprised by this. But we also mentioned the scripture makes it very clear. We mentioned this in our book, 25 Signs. We're near the end. There'll be a rise in anti-Semitism at the time of the end, a rise in anti-Semitism, and Christians will continue to be persecuted. Sign number 21 and 22. Now, there's three things. There's many things we know are going to happen, but three things we know will take place according to Scripture in the future. Western Europe will eventually become strong. They're weak now, but a strong 10-nation confederation. The European Union has something like 30-odd countries. That's going to dwindle down to 10 strong nations that'll form a last days confederation. We also know Iran's military might will be destroyed, which will likely, we know this from Ezekiel 38:39, which will likely open a path for the Jews to build a third temple. And this all fits in with the timeline of last days Bible prophecy. And so what we're seeing now is the stage being set for all this by the different things we view in the headlines every single day. It's amazing how it all fits in. So as we mentioned before, you just wait long enough, and these things will eventually be fulfilled. The example we often give, the lineup of nations in the 1970s for Israel and against Israel is exactly the opposite of what we would expect to see at the time of the end. Ezekiel 38 tells the list of nations that will attack Israel, that will invade, and other nations that will not invade, but will sit on the sidelines. And what do we find? Well, today we find exactly as the Bible said it's going to be. But in the 1970s, what do we find? We find Iran and Turkey as the best friends of Israel, and countries like Saudi Arabia and Egypt were the mortal enemies. Now it's just the opposite of that. We've got peace treaty with Egypt in 79. The Saudis, even though they haven't signed the Abraham Accords, the Gulf states are more friendly towards Israel, not because they like Israel, but because of Iran. They're afraid of them. But then countries like Iran and Turkey, which were Israel's best friend, have now become their mortal enemies. So we don't know when all this is coming. We do know it will come or precisely how it will come. So it's always wrong to put dates. We don't ever do dates here. We don't put a time limit on it. We don't say, like so many people say, well, soon you're going to see this, or almost, before you know it, this is going to happen. We don't know that. It could happen very soon, very quickly, or it may take more time. We have to, again, be patient, and we have to be understanding that God is the one running the show, not us. Now, what's also interesting in the lineup of these nations, not only the Gulf states that are friendly now towards Israel, Iran and Turkey, who have turned their backs on Israel, who are now their mortal enemies. Jordan is an interesting country. Jordan borders Israel. And there's an interesting story here. Jordan as collateral damage of the Israel-Hamas war. The war in Gaza has had already a terrible effect on Jordan's economy. Since the war started, visitors have been canceling trips to the country out of worries of spillover violence, not just fighting in Gaza, but of a major possibility right next door between Israel and Hezbollah on the Israel-Lebanon border. And there's been an upsurge of violence in Judea and Samaria, the so-called West Bank. Now, what's interesting here, beginning immediately in 1950, with all the Arab and Muslim delegates using the term the West Bank speeches at the UN, the rest of the world would quickly choose to forget the venerable names that have been in constant use for 3,000 years, not by just Jews, but by the entire Western world. And this is an interesting story here when it talks about Jordan kind of falling apart, about how the names are changing here. And the author went on to say, look at any American, British, French, German, Italian, Dutch, or Spanish, or Russian maps of the area up to 1950. What will you see? You will see it saying Judea and Samaria, clearly marked. And nowhere you will find these words like the West Bank. But here we are at the end of 2023, and precisely now, practically now, everyone uses this term without giving any thought to the biblical names of Judea and Samaria. So what's going on? Well, what we're seeing now here is they're changing the rules of the game, renaming lands, Palestine, the Palestinians. Do you realize when mid-19th, mid-20th century, before the State of Israel was formed, the major publication, the major Israeli Jewish publication, which is called the Palestinian Post, is now called the Jerusalem Post, because the Palestinians were Jews there in the middle of the 20th century. But you're using buzzwords now like occupation, genocide, and trying to obliterate Israel. So in the mid-20th century, again, Jews were called Palestinians, and no longer that. There's supposedly a whole group of people called Palestinians who've been there for 3,000 years, which, as we've said, nothing could be further from the truth. There are people from other Arab countries who went to Israel to work, countries such as Egypt, Iraq, Iran, Lebanon, whatever it might be. And so the problem we see right now is again, the names being changed, the idea that we continue to say things like the West Bank, we continue to use words like occupation, genocide, which are just so wrong. But Jordan here, and this is collateral damage for all of this, because Jordan is a country that is not mentioned in last days Bible prophecy, and neither is Syria, two nations that border Israel, which is really interesting because the nations that attack Israel come from above, beyond that. They come from the north, south, east, and west, countries such as Turkey, such as Iran, such as Russia. Then you go south, such as Libya, such as, the Morocco and Algeria, possibly too, Sudan, northern Sudan, which is called Kush in the Bible. So what's interesting, it's all wonderfully fitting into place. But what we see here is the minute fulfilling of what the scripture has to say, with which countries are involved, which countries are not involved, or which countries are irrelevant, like Jordan and Syria. They're just not mentioned. And with their strategic location, you'd think they'd be front and center, but they're not, because it's countries beyond them that are having the attacks against Israel in the last days. Now, all right, so here's what we need to do. We're about to end this year, 2023. And we need to understand that we have a responsibility, because we understand what's going on in the world, that we will live consistent with what the Bible tells us to do and how to live. And so I've got some, I think, closing words that we can all listen to and hopefully put into practice as we get into 2024. Paul tells the Philippians this in chapter 2, verses 14 to 16. He says, do everything without grumbling or arguing. Then you will be the pure and innocent children of God. You live among people who are crooked and evil. Well, isn't that the truth? But you must not do anything that they can say is wrong. In other words, our witness must be consistent here, to try to shine as lights among the people of this world as you firmly hold to the message that gives life. That's Philippians 2, 14 through 16, and that was the contemporary English version I read from there. All right. 2023 is almost over. 2024 is about upon us. This should be one of our prayers and goals for this next year. If we haven't done this, or if we have, we continue to shine as lights. Remember, Jesus said when he was here, he is the light of the world. We are his lights now in the world. So as we understand what's going on, as we see all these things minutely coming into place, as the Bible predicted, let us use 2024 to rededicate ourselves to preach the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ, which he came the first time, God the Son, to die for the sins of the world, so you and I could know God personally and have everlasting life in his presence. That's the message we preach, and that's what we're all about here on Breaking News. Okay, I'm Don Stewart. We'll have a program tomorrow as we end 2023. But until then, as always, may the Lord richly, richly bless you.